Hi traders, welcome back to another lesson. In this lesson we're going to be breaking down the plot function and I'll be demonstrating how you can use it to plot data onto your chart. So the plot function is used to plot numbers onto the chart and numbers only. We can't plot any other data type other than numbers using this particular function. So here we are just plotting the closing price onto our little indicator box here. If I change this to anything else, let's try and plot a Boolean, plot true. I'll save the script, we'll get an error. Cannot call plot with argument. An argument of bool type was used, but a series float type was expected. So we can only plot numbers. Let's try a string, text, save, error. Cannot call plot with argument text. An argument of string was used, but float is expected. So we cannot plot any data type other than numbers using this function. To plot other data types, we need to use other types of functions. But the plot function is still extremely useful for plotting things obviously like indicator values and so on. And so for this particular lesson, I'm just going to plot the closing price. And I'm going to walk you through the various parameters that this plot function takes that we can use to manipulate its output. So the first thing it takes is a series, and this could be anything. It could be a price value, open, high, low, close. It could be an indicator value. It could just be a number that we want to plot. So here we can plot the number 1 across our chart. We can also title the function. So I'm going to call this our plot, save the script. And now if I open up the settings menu by clicking on this little cog icon, here on the style tab, you can see that our plot now has a title. If we don't title our plot, then it would just be called plot. So the purpose of titling your plots is to make it easy for your user, the users of your script, to know what your plot does. And maybe they want to turn it off or change its color or its style. The next parameter we have to work with our plot function is the color parameter. So you can set the color to anything you want. By default, it's usually blue, but you can set this to any inbuilt color or custom color that you want. So for now, let's set it to purple. Save the script, and we have a purple line. The next parameter this plot function takes is line width. So this ranges from 1 to 5, I believe. So by default, it's 1, which is the thinnest line you can plot. If we set it to 5, it becomes very thick, like so. One valuable use case for this line width function is when plotting things like a moving average. Maybe you want your longer term moving average to be thicker than your shorter term moving average. For example, I created a script here called multiple moving averages. If I add that to my chart and we zoom out, if I turn on all of the moving averages, you can see that they range from thin to very thick at the bottom here, based on the length of the look back period for that moving average. So that's one useful practical use case for this line width parameter. The next parameter we have is style. So this is the style of the data that we're plotting. To change the style, you just type in plot dot and then control space, and any of these style built-in variables will dictate what your data looks like. So you could set it to circles, save the script. Now we're plotting actual circles onto the chart. You could set it to an area, for example. It's hard to see the peaks and valleys of this area because price action is so tight on this time frame. If we go out to the weekly, we can see a little bit more of that. We could also plot columns if we wanted to. So if I set this to columns and save the script, now we're plotting price as a column. So this is obviously most useful for something like plotting volume. So if we change the plot to volume, now we're plotting volume as a column. But let's change this back to a simple line. And I'll change our plot back to the closing price as well. Now, the next parameter we have to work with our plot function is the track price parameter. So track price is a Boolean parameter, true or false. It's false by default, so it's turned off by default. But if you want to turn it on, you just set this to true. And what this will do is just plot a horizontal line across our chart, like you see there, which is tracking the current price of our plot. So if I go down to a 1 minute time frame, you'll notice this line moving around as price action moves. And it's literally just tracking the price, the current price of this plot. The next parameter we can use in this function is the hist base parameter. So hist base is short for histogram base, and this is the base price of histograms, columns, and let me open up the plot documentation. So it says here that hist base is the price value used as the reference level when rendering plot with histograms, columns, or areas. So if I drop out to the 4-hour chart and we change our hist base to, let's say, 117. If I set it to 1.17 and I set my style to style columns and save the script, our hist base is now 1.17. And so any value that prints above 1.17 will be a column that prints in the upper half, and any value that prints below 1.17 will be in the lower half. So that's the purpose of hist base. You might have seen this style of plotting in something like a MACD, and it works on columns, as we just saw. It works on areas as well. So there's an area with the hist base applied, and it also works with histograms. So if I save the script, we get the same sort of effect. Now let me change this back to a simple line and get rid of our track price and hist base. And we'll go over some of these other parameters that we have to work with. So the next parameter we have to work with is offset. Now offset does exactly what it sounds like. It offsets the plot. So if we want to shift this plot 10 bars to the right, you would set offset to 10. And now watch when I save the script, our line here will shift over 10 bars to the right here. So if you want to shift to the left, you would use -10. If you want to shift to the right, you use a positive number. So let's shift this line 10 bars to the right. Let me save this script. And now you can see that the plot is plotting with an offset of 10 bars. So the current value is being plotted 10 bars to the right. If we wanted to plot this line 10 bars back, you would just add a negative sign in front of that offset parameter. And now the line is drawing 10 bars back. Now there are a handful of reasons why you would want to use this offset parameter in your plots. We're not going to cover them all in today's lesson, but we will in future lessons when we get into more practical use cases of these parameters in actual indicator and strategy scripts. So now let's get rid of this offset for a moment and look at the last few remaining parameters. The next one is join, and the join parameter is a true or false variable, and it basically just adds a joining line between our plots. Now when you're plotting a line like we are here, you don't need to use this parameter, it's useless. But if we were using something like, let's try a style cross, save the script, zoom in a little bit, you can see these crosses have gaps in between them. We're plotting the closing price, so it's jumping up here. As this big green bullish bar printed, the cross jumped up here. If we set join to true and save the script, now we have a line connecting all of our shapes. So any shape that has a gap between it, you can draw a line between them using the join parameter and setting it to true. The next parameter we can work with is editable. So by default, all of our plots are editable. But if you want to stop the user from changing your plot for whatever reason, personally, I've never used this parameter, but maybe there's a reason why you might want to prevent users from editing a certain plot in your script, you can set this to false. So by default, this is always true. But if we set it to false, watch what happens. Before I save the script, we'll open up the settings menu, and here's our plot here. If I save the script, wait for it to update, and then open the settings menu again, you'll notice that our plot style settings are gone. We can no longer change the style of this purple plot. Again, I don't know why you would want to limit the customization of your script by your users, but the option is there if you need to. Now, the next parameter we can work with is show_last. And show last basically just tells the script how many plots to display on the chart. So if we set show_last to 10, for example, we will only show the last 10 plots onto our chart. So let's save the script. And now you can see we only have 10 plots drawing onto the chart. So you won't need to use this often. I never have, but it could be useful in certain scripts where you don't want to show historical analysis. You only want to show the most recent analysis onto your chart. For example, maybe you want to reduce clutter from your chart if you're drawing something like support and resistance levels. For example, maybe you don't want your chart covered in lines that were drawn hundreds of bars ago. You just want to show the last handful. And now the final parameter we have to work with when it comes to plotting data to our chart is the display parameter. The display parameter just basically turns on or off the drawing of your plot. So by default, it's obviously enabled, but if you want to, you can hard code your plot to set it to display.none, and then the plot will not draw onto your chart. This is great for debugging, so maybe you have some functionality in your script that you want to be able to check visually what it's doing from time to time, but you don't actually want that information drawing onto the chart all of the time. You can set display.none in your plot parameter, and then in order to actually see this drawn to the chart, you need to come up to the settings menu and turn it on here by clicking on this little checkbox. Now, when you set this to display.none, it does stop drawing the actual indicator value. As you can see here, we don't get our value plotting. So this essentially just turns the plot off completely. But let's say that you don't want the data actually plotting onto your chart, but you still want to see the number. The best way to achieve this is using transparency. Now we'll cover the color functionality in PineScript in a future lesson. We won't go into detail in this lesson, but just really quickly to show you how it's possible to set a plot to be transparent, you can use the color.new function. So here I'm creating a new color. I'm using the color.new and then passing in the purple color. If I add a comma on the end here and type in 100 and then close off this parentheses we opened here, we're now creating a new color of the color purple with 100% transparency. And now if I save the script, you'll see our plots disappear, but the value is still plotting on the indicator status bar. So this is another great debugging tool, or a way to plot something like the ATR. For example, maybe you want to plot the ATR in your script, but you don't want the ATR actually drawing over the top of price action. This is how you could go about doing that. And that brings us to the end of this lesson. I'll see you in the next one.